All right, so good afternoon, everyone. Everybody's okay? It's a long week for everybody at Ignite. Even I am a little bit more tired than I was the day before. I hope you had a great event so far. I hope you will have a great evening tonight. We're together for that last session of the day. Thanks for joining me. And today I really want to focus very quickly on 10 ways to improve communication is in Office 365, but really I can open up like the different tools and we go over some features. I will showcase some of these things, but my goal is more to talk about how can you actually improve some of the things that we do as we try to do them in terms of communicating. So in terms of how are we going to deliver the right message to our audience, whoever that is, using Office 365 as tools. Is everybody still okay? You guys okay? All right. My name is Benjamin Nyland. I work for a company called ShareGate, and if you want to reach out on Twitter at @bnyland or LinkedIn, say it was at Ignite. I'm friendly. No worries there. But I'm not going to spend too much time on me. We only have 20 minutes, so I'm going to dive right into it. Of course, every great session starts with stats, so I'm starting with stats as well. But as I was looking at my research and looking at how to prepare this session, I thought, well, what is the problem that we're actually trying to solve? And I noticed that some of the, just last year, it was a survey with 400 organizations that had over 100,000 users. Now, bear with me, these larger organizations might not necessarily reflect what you're living on the day-to-day, but about $62 million a year was lost because of bad communication ultimately. Now, communication is a broad word, and it goes between managers. It's all kinds of people not understanding and not getting the clarity on their purpose at work and what they're supposed to be doing, what's expected of them, generally speaking. What was very interesting is 60% don't measure. So people that are professionals as internal communication specialists at the office, they focus on the communication that they want to have. They focus on the message. Have you guys lived that where we're just getting pushed content? And I lived that when we were building an intranet on SharePoint a couple of years ago. And two communications people sat in a room and they decided how the entire navigation was going to be, how the front page was going to behave, what message it would try to push. But it was just two people deciding for everyone because that was what they wanted, and not necessarily what the audience wanted. And this is what's interesting is that no one, or 60% of them, don't measure whether or not it was successful. And 30 minutes per day, according to Forrester, are lost productivity minutes that can be, or they believe can be gained back using Office 365 tools. So bear with me, we're going to dive into this. But before we do, I wanted to talk to you about an experience I lived at the office. And ever since that, I've changed a lot of what I do. I don't know if everyone's ever heard of this person or read the book. It's called Nonviolent Communication. I strongly recommend it, but I even recommend the training that are offered in various cities. It actually started with, and I may be wrong, and go and correct me in this case, but in like a heated area of Detroit where a lot of fights were happening, a lot of violence were happening where he lived, and he realized that most of the time it was a communication problem. It was the way we use certain words that made the other person react and defend and want to react violently. And in the last couple of years, it's been applied for workplaces. And at the office, we had everyone follows this training because a lot of the things happening in the office, a lot of the problems, a lot of not being able to deliver on the mission, on the objectives, on when you're trying to communicate, whether you're a manager or not, when you're trying to communicate whatever it is that you're trying to communicate using, and then we can talk about Yammer and about SharePoint pages, and there's tons of tools, and we're going to look at them. But the words that you decide to use, the strategy that you developed to be able to talk to people, it can have an immense impact. And ever since this, every message, everything that I do has had a lot more success simply by putting a strategy in place where I'm not making the other people responsible for what I'm trying to communicate. Now, This is a lot of information. You're probably wondering, okay, what is he talking about? I encourage you to check out the book because communication is not about finding the right tool at the right time. We will figure that out. You will go to another session, you'll go back to the office, spare a couple of hours, and there'll be a stream videos. You'll find Yammer messages, and the next year there'll be new innovations. But if we can't deliver the right message, then we're never going to be successful. So it starts with the words that you use and the strategy you employ to communicate. And then, of course, we enter the space of Office 365. We have objectives, we have communications that we want to deliver. Technology is a piece that's going to help us to deliver that message broadly, effectively, have engagement, reward engagement. All of these communications will be done and leveraged through technology. I love this slide because it's nice, Office 365, but there's a lot of products. There's a lot to choose from. So what should I use and when is a question that I hear literally every year since about 2015 when Microsoft started introducing Office 365 groups and working with as many products as you want. So when do I use Yammer? When do I use Planner? When do I use an email? When do I use a group mailbox? When do I use SharePoint pages? Now there's SharePoint news, hub sites, home sites. So there's a lot to choose from, and if having an effective communication starts with understanding what they are and how they work. I reused this slide in another session. I love this slide because one of the things you need to understand is how do your people, how does your audience, the people you want to communicate to, how do they work? What tools are they using currently in Office 365? And I've organized it in 3 simple buckets. I got the help from other MVPs, Susan Hanley, which is great and logical information. I recommend you follow her as well for that. And essentially, we have me type of work, we have we type of work, or we have us type of work. And depending on what kind of communication you want to have, or what is your message, I encourage you to look into the right tools that focus on that type of work or where people are doing. So if I'm doing me kind of work, everyone understands me kind of work. It's me, for myself, and I. So I have a personal mailbox, I send emails, and I receive them. If I open up Microsoft Teams, I have one-on-one chats that I can have, private messages, or with a few people, but that's it, right? If I open up a to-do list, if I open up anything that's OneDrive for business, it's me work. So messages that you want to individuals, I'll target through these tools. Maybe a Microsoft Teams bot will be more adequate if I want to reach based on individuals, right? Because it will be through a one-on-one message. But it won't be the same thing that I will use if I'm looking at we type of work, people collaborating on projects because something is changing, because then I'll be looking at Teams team, Teams site, Planner, group mailboxes. Then I will use these kind of tools to communicate to we type of work situations. And then lastly, I have us kind of work, us as a division, us as a department, whether it's the home sites in SharePoint, hub sites, communication sites, Yammer, all of these things that are more us as a division, and then I'll use those tools to communicate us as a company, us as a division, us as a department, and this is what I want to deliver to everyone today, right? It's figuring out what kind of things you want to reach. Everybody still okay? We're getting there. All right, so Microsoft likes to use the sort of every year it's a different buzzword, and it's fine, we love it. Today is intelligent intranet. This whole thing of Office 365, I think we called it modern workplace also for a lot of time, but when we're focused on SharePoint, Office 365, we're calling it the intelligent intranet. And there's a couple of things that you can do. I'm not going to go over things you've already seen, but underneath it is always SharePoint, because what SharePoint is to everything and around everything is the content service. Internally, they almost all the time call it that. It's the content service because it provides the service of hosting and catering the content for other products. So when you go in Teams and you drop files, or you want to do a page there to showcase something, it's actually SharePoint hosting it. It's the content service. If you are in Planner, you want to attach a document to a task, it's not in Planner. It goes in the SharePoint document library behind it, and so on and so on. And it's also the content service for people that want to communicate themselves. We go to SharePoint and we'll create pages, we'll create documents, we'll add metadata so that we can use it the right way. And the different ways that you can use SharePoint, and I'll open it up very quickly, which I'm sure you've seen many times in terms of the demos that you've seen this week or in modern SharePoint. There are different ways to use this technology to host the content to communicate. You have something called SharePoint News. And then again, do you want week kind of work news? So by team site, you can create team news. Then these team news can go to a we situation, a we department, and we're going to be talking about hub sites. Hub sites are the thing that encompasses multiple team sites. So as team sites use team news, they automatically roll up to your hub site, providing a centralized news location that you can leverage. So I'll have, for example, internally, I'll have the product team communication site that's a hub site, and then every single product team inside of it, whether it's the designers, product one, the data team, they'll have their different team sites. Well, they'll use their team news that will then automatically roll up to the hub of a product team, and I can tell everyone, come to the product team to get all of the product news that are happening. The home sites is at the top level, which we will have our organizational news, generally speaking. We're broad to the entire company at this place. So I'm just going to dive into it very quickly. You're in SharePoint, right? And you click on New. Over here, we are in a hub site, so a site that encompasses different departments beneath it using the mega menu. So these are two different team sites that are beneath it, but just logically, they're not physically beneath it. They'll have their own team news that rolls up, and it will appear in the hub site over here. When we're talking about communicating, we're talking about creating news posts or pages, which is, to be honest, they're exactly the same thing. There's literally no difference between a news post and a page, except there's a little metadata tag when it gets created. If you go to the document library, there's a column, and it just says whether or not it's going to be showcased as a news article or just a page that you can link to. But essentially, they're exactly the same thing. And the beauty here is when you craft these, you have complete control over what template do you want to use, what does it look like, but most people don't realize that you can template these as well. So you can create one, say what you want news to behave like or what you want it to look like, and every time, let's say I want my product managers that every time they communicate a release, I want to follow a certain format. Why? Because I want to get people used to a routine. I want them to realize this is where I'm going to have the objectives. I know if I scroll down, I'm going to get these in my messaging, so I'll scroll down. So I want to use a certain template. And the way that you do that is, of course, you create the item. And of course, it's quite fast today. You're able to control the background images. You already have a certain template that's been used to be able to deliver that right message. And by the way, about 65% of all of us humans in the workplace, we're visual. So it is important for you to drive your messages with high visuals that communicate your message more than your text. Your text is just as important. You don't want to let people down that are not necessarily visual and want to read through everything. But your titles, whether you're going to embed videos from Stream, and this is really the beauty of SharePoint Page because it's the content service. The other tools have their skills, where here I can go to Stream. Oh, that's 3 versions of me, it looks like. So we had to make it fun a little bit at the end of the day. You upload your videos in Stream, and Stream has another full set of capabilities that allows you to automatically add the text. I didn't enter any of this text. It listened to the voiceover, generated a text that people can search through, has analytics, has closed captioning. The video is its expertise itself. But then I can take this video and bring it to my message, which is on my content service, which is the actual SharePoint news. I can add what we call a widget or web part or whatever you want it, find Stream, and add the video. So definitely leverage SharePoint as the centralized content where you store the information. And then we can figure out, do I want to communicate it via Yammer? Do I want to communicate it via Teams? Do I want to communicate it via another method? But have SharePoint be where you store the content so you can roll it up later, so you can easily find it, generate workflows, automate tasks based on it. So we've seen a little bit of SharePoint, which again, I think you've seen many times this week, and I have a lot more to share. You then have Microsoft Teams, the we area of work. In there you have your different teams. You have then channels that you can leverage that are, generally speaking, the topics that you're gonna use to start talking, and more importantly, the ability of adding tabs. The way that I recommend using Teams to apply your communications is multiple things. One, you can actually add your own button or your own app directly in the navigation. So if you customize something, if you create a SharePoint page or a centralized news hub for your organization, you can actually add it directly here and have notifications whenever something happens. So if this has to be your general home news announcements and you want them in Teams because you want people that are in their we work of state to be able to quickly jump to those news items, you can. The second way is one-to-one using bots, and you want to message individual people. Hey, did you forget to check in for whatever? Then you'll be able to do that at an individual level. Otherwise, if it's at the team or department level, you're going to go inside of the Microsoft Teams team. You're going to be able to use the tabs to centralize something, even a SharePoint page or a news, or anything else that you want, such as a connector that happens directly in the chat that brings your news in a Teams channel directly and deliver that message to the teams directly. And finally, the other method of communicating. So remember, we have me, we, us, we being Teams, us being the Yammer portion. And this is where we typically will find, and I put the new Yammer because I don't want to showcase the previous Yammer. We're going to forget about that one. So here we're really going to be talking about your town halls, communicating towards outside. Microsoft used to call this the outer loop. And then you'll be able to have question and answers. What was the top questions? If you've ever used Slido to be able to surface questions up top, you'll get things like this where you're able to record, live stream, and all of these in general speaking. Manage your conversations. I'm not going to go into the Yammer features again. So we have these three tools. Now I'm going to start diving into, I don't make sure I watch out for that time. Wow, we still have about, that was my intro, folks. Now you got the tools, you got the state. You want to start understanding what is people's needs. Where do they want to, what are you trying to do? But what do they want? I've seen too many times where people just focus on what it is that I want to communicate. That's irrelevant. And I've seen it at my work all the time. We have town halls, and the person doing the town hall just wants to push their message. That's not going to work because it has to connect with what people's jobs to be done are. It's a free book. I highly recommend it. And it basically focuses on what are people's job to be done? What are they trying to accomplish? And if you keep hammering a certain message and it's not what they're trying to accomplish, you're not going to get anywhere. It's a very small book, highly recommended. You can use Microsoft Forms. Microsoft Form is my favorite tool in the suite. It's incredible to gather information. You go to Microsoft Forms, you can create a form or a quiz, which allows you to ask questions, rank answers, and truly gather the requirements from people. So before you start tailoring, okay, I want to absolutely communicate my new message, figure out what do people want to hear from you? What are people's needs and requirements all over the place? And another great way I found is a free tool called Office Vibe that's focused on managers to have a better team, and it allows to collect anonymously feedback from their team and what they want and what they're trying to accomplish, and rolls it up to the manager. They have a paid version, but you can get started with free, and I found that very, very useful to gather the feedback up. And then when you want to deliver that message that you want, then you kind of a little bit more aware of what are people's needs behind of it all. Microsoft Forms, very straightforward. You theme a little bit, choose what kind of question. My favorite is ranking, because people want everything. But if you force them to rank from top to bottom what's most important to them, it forces them to make choices and allows you to collect those requirements.
The next step is for you to figure out, based on all of these requirements, based on each topic that I want to message, list your topics, what is the target group, what tool you want to use internally. You want to guide people to using the right tools. I found this on Predica, a consulting company I found very useful, thought I would add it there. But what's hardest and what most people do not do after they figured out what message to do is measure. How many did you send? How many were opened? How many were clicked? Are you able to track this? How are you going to track this? Microsoft has added views number. Okay, I sent out an email, or I sent out a message via Teams, or I sent out a news communication. How many turned into views? How many did I try to reach? If I don't have the open rate or the click rate, fine, but how many landed on the page? And how many did I lose? Make sure you have call to actions on the page. You always want to be selling your next step. You always want to bring people to a place, but not message the end result, but rather have call to actions that you can measure in your messages. Whether it's an email, whether it's a news page, whether it's a Yammer post, what do you want to measure out of that? A/B test your titles. Who said you couldn't? You have audience targeting in Office 365 and SharePoint in your news. If you have enough users in your company, why not try different titles for the same message and see which one works better over time? Okay, I guess I'm almost finished. And for those watching the recording, the expo hall just turned the lights off. And then the engagement on your news, the engagement of your messages, the engagement on your Yammer post, on your town halls. Don't just do the message and see if it works. See if there's engagement and people are engaging within it, and then reward that engagement by emojis, by saying thank you, by making sure there's a response happening there. Essentially, what I recommend is forget being an internal communications for a second. Go look at what people are doing on the product side of things. MailChimp, what do they recommend doing? If you were a software company, what would you do to try and reach people using your email communications, using your website? You are now a software company, and your customers is your colleagues. You got to optimize, you got to figure out how you're going to grab their attention. So the top 10 list for the last moment of the day. First, know your users, research the personas, the customer, by the way, IT and drug dealers, only people that call them users. That's it. We call them users and drug dealers call them users, that's it. Figure out what are you trying, who are they, what do they want, jobs to be done, user research, even within your company. 2, understand how the tools work, SharePoint, Yammer, there's tons of out there. I could have shown you how to do a nice news page. It's irrelevant. You can find that out yourself. Training, education on that. Gather requirements from people. What do they want to hear? What are they trying to accomplish? What is their job to be done? Do surveys from your managers, from your team. Figure out what are they trying to get so that your message can go halfway with them and their needs. Determine your communication objectives. What are you trying to achieve? How are you going to be able to measure it? Build a set of guidelines for what should be used, when, and how. I'm going. Craft titles like you work in a digital marketing company. Your titles in your messages has to be the desired outcome for the people that are going to be viewing it. What are they trying to complete? The title must abide to it. Craft content with visuals and storytelling from A to Z or Z. Forget which one we have to use here. So figure out how to make sure there's a storytelling, there's titles, there's call to actions. Always sell the next step. Be able to track the next step. Measure your call to actions. Measure your results and always adapt based on what's been clicked or not. We talked about rewarding engagements. And then as a bonus, don't give up. Just be constant in your communications and however you use them. Folks, thank you very much. I hope this was helpful, and I'll see you at the party.